Since the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, a lot of focus was on the successful Ukrainian defense. Yet one aspect that is often missed is the capability of Ukraine to perform damage control. And there are cases where defense is far harder to do and less efficient than doing just damage control. In this video, we look at the resilience of Ukraine and how they quickly recover from attacks in the telecommunication and cyber domain. To discuss my various questions, we have as a guest an expert on cyber conflict, the grugq. From my understanding, one can defend against cyber attacks, so basically prevent them, but that is rather difficult to do. And the other aspect is to basically do damage control to mitigate the problems that are generated. Could you give a brief overview about cyber defense and then cyber damage control? And I made the second term up, so if there's a proper term, please use that one.
No, we use incident response, which sounds very nice. So
incident response, okay, yeah.
Incident response, yeah. So you've had a cyber incident and you respond to it and clean up and stuff like that. Well, so cyber defense is, just part of cybersecurity. It's where all of the money gets spent. It's very hard to do. There's a lot involved. Basically, it works really well for certain classes of attack. That tends not to include things like the GRU or the FSB. You can if you think of it a little bit like having an armed guard in front of a building, it's really useful. It's going to keep kids from spray painting. It might keep skateboarders away. It might even stop a robber. But if the GRU shows up with, a Spetsnaz unit, that guy is not going to do much. It's similar to that. It's that when a state is involved, there's not a lot you can do. If the state wants it, they're going to get it by hook or by crook. So because Ukraine has been living in that reality for the last, 8 years since 2014, they've been living in a cyber environment where there's a state that not only wants access, but is not it's not constrained in any way. There's no norms. There's no idea of we don't want this to be public because that would be embarrassing to us on the international stage. None of that. It's even further than that. There's value in being known to the Ukrainians that, we are hacking you. We are defacing you. We're stealing your stuff. We are doing this. Be afraid. And so Ukrainians have been living with that for 8 years, and the psychological impact in many ways has just vanished to a large extent. It's gone from this big scary thing to the Russians are at it again.
It's like raining for us. It's raining in London or something. It's like, okay, I got to get the umbrella.
It's like, the pizza's going to be late because there's a lot of traffic. Life goes on. And so while the actual incidents themselves do have impact, if the if the networks that run the car registration, if that's down, you can't do any of the things that you need to do in terms of, getting your car registered or updated or whatever. But that's sort of that's an annoyance that you live with during the day, not oh my God, it's the end of the world. Our national infrastructure is being destroyed. The Russians are coming. So the factual reality impact exists, but the psychological impact does not. And that's a large part of the resilience that the Ukrainians have, is that a lot of these attacks don't have a lot of permanence. They're not very long living. They don't exist for a huge. It's different, of course, but generally speaking, it's a short period of annoyance that you sort of get over. And the psychological impact of we've been attacked, they've destroyed our systems, they've done all that once that goes away, it becomes, okay, we just need to reinstall. It's a chore. It's not it's not a huge event anymore. And that, as I said, resilience, that is part of the magic sauce that Ukraine has in the cyber domain. Like they're not particularly great at defense. Like they're not the worst in the world, but they're not necessarily the best. And the thing is, they get hit, but they recover really quickly and keep going. That's sort of the thing that has allowed them to remain effective. So when they get hit, they switch to another system, they rebuild the system that got hit, and they keep going. And if they have to, they'll switch to another system again. So, they'll move from their email systems to using Telegram, to using Signal or WhatsApp or whatever. They can shift to something else that happens to be up and working. And that adaptability and that flexibility is much better for defense in this case than trying really hard to keep the Russians out of your email, because if you're invested in that and they somehow get access, then everything falls apart. But if you're like, we'd rather they didn't, but if they do, here's my Signal number, catch me on that. That's how they operate, and that has been very, very useful.
So basically, for me, I was thinking then, why don't the Russians, for instance, attack the telecommunication sector like one major provider for cellular phones? But I guess a lot of them have already Wi-Fi, so they would switch to Wi-Fi. And then, of course, they would have to attack the ISPs, but there are several ISPs. So it's basically, and once the one is up again, probably they might bring another one down. But so you have this system of, because there are several communications providers, that it's probably too hard to keep everything down at the same time.
Yeah, so they've tried to. So one of the things that confused us a lot was, why does Ukraine still have internet access? So during the first few days, that made sense, right? From the Russian point of view, you want internet access because you want to tell the Ukrainian people that they've been rescued from, whatever. Russia's here, it's all over, we're happy. You need that communications access. But then in that first week, when like the TikTok war started, and all of the Telegram stuff came out, and it became very, very clear that the Ukrainians were much better at information warfare than the Russians were. That they were able to take all of these videos that put the Russians in a really bad light and show the Ukrainians really well, and sort of push them out to the world stage. At that point, we're thinking, boom, cut the internet. It's no longer a thing that's useful for you. You would cut that off. And we've actually, we did see several attempts at that. There was an attack that tried to take out one of the major ISPs, where they actually did drop a huge amount of traffic, and it was down to just like essential router to router backbone stuff. Like there wasn't any actual user traffic going across, and that lasted like an afternoon. Like they tried really hard, and the story is, I don't know if it's true, but it's theoretically possible. The story is that there was a engineer that worked for that company, and he was in a region that got overrun. And so they basically found him and forced him to give his credentials over so that they could access and use, like they didn't hack in. They just said, we need your password. And he said, no. And then they said, okay, well, do you want your hands? And then he said, yes. So, whatever it was. But essentially, they forced him to give over his credentials. They gained access. There was this huge battle of like trying to kick them out, and them trying to like destroy things and all that. And like it was a Wednesday, right? And by Thursday, it was over. So they tried, and they were unable to disconnect the internet, which again, I think it goes back to something we've said earlier, which is that it's, in theory, it's really exciting and possible, and you could do all of these big Hollywood style attacks, and then in practice, it turns out that there's people who are resisting, who are not going along, who are not trying to make you win. Like the enemy gets a vote. So I think that that is one of the things that hasn't been factored in, and that we have seen, is that the Ukrainian defense in some ways is just, they're tenacious, and they don't give up, and they're willing to fight for things. So
I think in your talk, I heard one example that they switched to an analog system. I think that the rail network was attacked, or the
Right.
computers were in a rail network, or the system. I don't
Yeah.
know.
So, in that part of the world, the the major logistical systems are all on rail. If you want to get something a huge distance and you want to get a lot of it, you need railway. And so the Ukrainians knew that this was going to be a problem. They had switched over to computer systems because it's
It's faster and
2022.
more convenient.
Yeah, I mean, like that's just the way. Um, and the the Russians obviously wanted to do what they could to stop the logistics. They were unable to because what the Ukrainians did as this was going, as the war was starting, they switched back to their old Soviet system of controlling trains and doing communication. So it's this, ancient analog system that is like it's probably complete garbage. Like if you get access to it, it's got to be like super easy to do whatever malicious thing you want, but you need to have access to it, which if you're stuck in a tank on the wrong side of the river, you don't have access. So it's it's part of that resilience thing, the ability to switch to other systems to get things that are pre-internet, to get them out of storage and start using that. There's a lot of that that's happened. It's also not necessarily part of the defense, but one of the things is the Russians haven't tried to take out all of the cell towers and all of the telephone networks because they're using them themselves. They are oftentimes their radios are not able to go particularly long distances, and they fall back to using phones. And that's been very useful for the Ukrainians because they have access to all of the information about the telcos, and so they refer to these as spring flowers. Basically, it's a phone that you've never seen before, just comes up, and immediately, like when it shows up, it's like, call the boys at the artillery. I've got some new coordinates. So that has, I don't know if it's still effective. I know that they were doing that earlier on, but yeah, like the guys at the telecos were looking for phones that would suddenly show up in clusters out of nowhere that they'd never seen before in areas that were known to be controlled by the Russians, and that would be handed off as coordinates. So I like there's a lot of cool stuff that's happened in cyber that just it doesn't rise to the level of what people are looking for.
I think I heard this before, or I read this 1 or 2 years ago. Somebody, I mean, this was, I think, a NATO exercise, and I think they switched on Tinder. And since Tinder has location as well, and they use that information basically to locate the OP4 as well. And they just showed how vulnerable everyone is, because then you suddenly see, okay, there's like, oh, there's a lot of female soldiers basically on Tinder, which is too many. So they are clustered there because this is, or there must be at least a barracks, and then they know something like this, and especially, yeah, because I mean you have a GPS in every phone, and triangulation is I think really easy to do with telecommunication systems now.
Yeah, but there's examples of people going further than that. So there's at least one hacker who claims, and he's shown some evidence for it. Basically, he created, I'm not sure if it's Tinder, but so he created Tinder profiles and put the location as being near areas that were known to have Russian troops. And then, sending nudes and like, oh, send me a picture of you. I need to see more of the background. Oh, where are you located? And then using that, all of that information. So there's actually an app that the Ukrainian military has set up where you can submit photos and videos and information, and all of that will be used to, potential as intelligence sources to potentially do artillery strikes. And so he was feeding this information that he was collecting into one of these systems, and he says the place that he had found got hit by artillery. So like,
So basically, if you get a question, can I have a photo with you and your tank? It's probably not a good idea. So this could also be to use tank. Yeah, I mean, you could basically get a table of organization and equipment from a unit to a certain degree with that.
Yeah, well, the Wagner group was particularly good for that. Like they loved, like the Kadyrovites are called like the TikTok unit, like they're TikTok warriors, and they get geolocated all of the time. The Wagner group, they were really big on sort of promoting themselves on these Telegram channels, and there was one particular user who filmed a visit from like the head of the group, who had come out to see their headquarters. And in filming, he had in the background, it crossed first the street sign. So you got the name of the street, and then it went through the building and it got the number of the building. So like it wasn't even
a
like
death sentence, basically.
It was. He has stopped posting. There was a strike, it hit the HQ, and he hasn't been online since. So
yeah, I'm not sure if you saw, I think there's a video from the internet historian about the Shia LaBeouf thing, he won't divide us or something. Yes. And he had like a flag, and he showed how long it took them for like with pictures of just of the sky to find out where the flag is, because they used the data from the different airlines, and then they found out, okay, it must be around here, and then they took down the flag. But you could just on the picture, for the people who don't know, you could see the flag, I think, and the sky, and basically from the wind direction of the flag in combination with the trails from the aircraft, they found out where the flag is located and took it down, I think, a few days or even hours afterwards.
So it was absolutely amazing. First, they looked at the sky to figure out which time zone it's in. And then from there, they matched it up with like areas that they had known that he had traveled to. And then from there, they matched the contrails that they could see against known flights from airlines. And then from there, they sent someone who was in the region to drive around and honk the horn. And when they heard,
that was it's our location. It was
like,
really
okay, there you go. It was nuts, and it was like 2 days, right? Like he puts it up, you can see the sky. 2 days later, they found it, from nothing, literally a flag in the sky. Yeah. So if you're taking photos during wartime and posting them online, you will have a very short life expectancy.
Thank you very much for the information.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye.